Jury desperate to get up on the outside. Arcs, oh, it's going to go!
June 22nd, 1994. The Rose Bowl, Pasadena, California. Andrés Escobar, Colombia's captain, their best defender, the man they called the gentleman of football, stretched his leg to cut out an American cross. What happened next would kill him. 10 days later, he was shot dead in a Medellín nightclub parking lot. 6 bullets. Witnesses said the gunman shouted one word after every shot. Goal! 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 The Colombian World Cup team had received death threats before the tournament even started. Their manager had been warned to drop a specific player. And when Escobar's own goal helped eliminate Colombia from the World Cup, the people who controlled Colombian football, the drug cartels, decided someone had to pay. This is not a football story. This is a murder story. And it starts long before that cross came in. To understand why Andrés Escobar died, you have to understand what Colombian football meant in the early 1990s. Because it wasn't just sport, it was identity, it was hope, and it was funded by cocaine. Colombia in the 1980s and early 90s was a country at war with itself. Pablo Escobar, no relation to Andrés, ran the Medellín Cartel, the most powerful criminal organization on earth. The Cali Cartel controlled the other half of the country. Bombings, assassinations, kidnappings. This was daily life. But there was one thing that united every Colombian. One thing that made the violence stop, if only for 90 minutes. Football. The Colombian national team of the early 1990s was something special. Carlos Valderrama, the magician with the hair. Faustino Asprilla, unpredictable, electric, unplayable on his day. René Higuita, the goalkeeper who did scorpion kicks. Freddy Rincon, the powerhouse midfielder. And at the heart of the defense, Andrés Escobar. Number 2, the captain. They played a style of football that was pure joy. Short passes, flair, creativity, swagger. In 1993, they beat Argentina 5-0 in Buenos Aires. Let me say that again. Colombia went to Buenos Aires, the temple of South American football, and beat Argentina. The Argentina of Batistuta, Redondo, Simeone, 5-0. After that match, Pelé himself said Colombia could win the 1994 World Cup. The entire world believed it. But there was something the world didn't understand. Something about who really controlled that team, and what would happen if they failed. Colombian football in the 1990s was bankrolled by drug money. This was an open secret. The biggest clubs, Atlético Nacional, América de Cali, Millonarios, were owned or controlled by cartel figures. Pablo Escobar himself was known to fund local teams, build football pitches in poor neighborhoods, pay for youth academies. For the cartels, football was 3 things: a way to launder money, a way to buy public affection, and the only thing in Colombia that gave people genuine happiness. By 1994, Pablo Escobar was dead, killed by Colombian security forces in December 1993. But the cartels hadn't gone anywhere. The Cali cartel, led by the Rodriguez Orejuela brothers, was now the dominant power. And they had enormous money riding on the World Cup. Not just gambling money, reputational money, national pride money, the kind of money where failure was not an option. Before the tournament, Colombia's coach Francisco Maturana received a phone call. A voice told him, "Drop a certain player or there would be consequences." The player was Gabriel Gomez, a midfielder who the cartels didn't want in the squad. Maturana refused. He picked his team. Another call came. This time the message was clearer. If Colombia doesn't perform, people will get hurt. The players knew. Escobar knew. Everyone knew what was at stake. And then they flew to America. The 1994 World Cup was supposed to be Colombia's coronation. First match, Romania. Colombia were favorites. They lost 3-1. The Romanian counterattack tore them apart. The pressure was now unbearable, but they still had a chance. Beat the United States in the second match, and qualification was back in their own hands. June 22, 1994. The Rose Bowl, Pasadena. Colombia versus USA. A must-win game. The match was tight, tense. Neither side created much. Then, in the 35th minute, the moment. John Harkes, the American midfielder, sends a low cross into the Colombian box. It's not a dangerous ball, it's a routine clearance. Escobar tracks it, stretches his right leg to intercept. Andrés Escobar had scored an own goal at a World Cup. In Colombia's most important match in decades, the USA scored again. Colombia lost 2-1. 2 defeats, they were eliminated. In the final match against Switzerland, meaningless now, Colombia won 2-0. Escobar played well. He even smiled at the end. He had convinced himself that the worst was over. After the tournament, he wrote a column for El Tiempo newspaper in Bogotá. His words were graceful, dignified, almost prophetic. He wrote, "Life doesn't end here. No matter how difficult, we must stand up. We have only 2 options. Either allow the frustration and anger to paralyze us, or we overcome it and move forward. To my family, to my country, to my friends, to my teammates, I'm sorry. See you soon, because life doesn't end here." Life doesn't end here. He flew home to Medellín. 10 days later, he was dead. July 1st, 1994. Medellín. Escobar had been home for less than 2 weeks. Friends were telling him to stay inside, to keep a low profile. The anger in Colombia after the World Cup elimination was real. Death threats had been sent, but Escobar refused to hide. "People need to see my face," he said. "They need to know I'm not ashamed. I made a mistake. I'm a human being." That night, he went out with friends to a restaurant, then to a nightclub, El Indio, in an upscale part of Medellín. At around 3 a.m., he walked out to the parking lot alone. 3 men approached him. An argument began. Words were exchanged about the own goal, about the World Cup, about what Escobar had cost them. Then one of the men, later identified as Humberto Castro Muñoz, a bodyguard for a drug trafficking family, pulled out a .38 caliber revolver. He fired 6 times. Escobar collapsed on the concrete. He was 27 years old. Witnesses, waitresses from the club, Escobar's friends who ran out when they heard the shots, all told the same story. After every bullet, the gunman shouted one word: "Goal." They had turned his own goal into his execution chant. Escobar was rushed to the hospital. He died 45 minutes later. His last words, reportedly, were, "I'm going to see my mother." More than 120,000 people attended Andrés Escobar's funeral. They lined the streets of Medellín. They wept. They held signs. "And you will always be our champion." Even in death, Escobar had united Colombia. But the question started immediately. Was it really just a drunken argument about a football match? Or was this a cartel hit? A punishment for failure, ordered by men who had bet millions on Colombia's success? The official story never fully satisfied anyone. Humberto Castro Muñoz, the gunman, was arrested within days. He was convicted of murder and sentenced to 43 years. He served just 11 years before being released for good behavior in 2005. The 2 men with him, brothers Pedro and Juan Santiago Galón, were also convicted as accomplices. They served even less time. But here's what the official story left out. Castro Muñoz worked for the Galán brothers. The Galán brothers were connected to drug trafficking. They had links to individuals with cartel ties who had placed enormous bets on Colombia at the 1994 World Cup. Were these the people who had threatened the team before the tournament? The same people who told Maturana to drop Gabriel Gomez? Nobody ever proved it. Nobody ever linked the murder directly to the cartels in a way that held up in court. But nobody in Colombia believes it was random either. Escobar's own family has always maintained that the investigation was incomplete. that powerful people made sure the trail stopped at the parking lot. Andrés Escobar's legacy is complicated because his death changed Colombian football, but not in the way anyone wanted. Colombia's golden generation fractured. The 1998 World Cup team was a shadow of what they had been. The swagger, the joy, the fearless creativity. It was replaced by caution, by fear. It would take 20 years for Colombia to truly recover. When they reached the quarterfinals of the 2014 World Cup, with James Rodriguez, Radamel Falcao, a new generation of fearless talent, it felt like a rebirth. But for those who remember 1994, there's always an absence. A number 2 jersey that should have been on that pitch. Escobar's brother Santiago runs a football academy in Medellín called the Andrés Escobar Foundation. It teaches young players not just how to play football, but how to be good people. The gentleman of football lives on through them. Every year on July 2nd, the anniversary of the murder, Colombian football pauses. Players wear black armbands. Fans hold up banners. In stadiums across the country, one name is chanted: Andrés. 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 At the 1994 World Cup, after Escobar was killed, the Colombian team retired the number 2 jersey. They never issued it again, because some numbers belong to one man, and some stories should never have happened. The Andrés Escobar story is not just about football. It's about what happens when sport becomes life and death. It's about the forces, criminal, political, economic, that surround the beautiful game and sometimes poison it. If you want more stories from the dark side of football, the scandals, the tragedies, the crimes that shape the game we love, subscribe to Football Ups. New documentary every week, and tell me in the comments, which football tragedy should I cover next? The Heysel disaster? Justin Fashanu? The Super League collapse? Let me know. I'll see you in the next one.